All right, everyone, if we could take our seats, we're going to get started here in a minute.
That's okay. I went through here 3 times and haven't kicked it yet.
Well done. Hi, how are you? I don't know. Do you want us to go? What do you want us to do?
I'll invite you up.
We have plenty of seats.
All right, well, welcome everyone to the West Hill Voter Town Hall. My name is Jeremy Williams, president of the West Hill Community Association. I'm really happy that you all could make it this evening. I just want to jump right into the program, but before I do, I want to thank our candidates for coming and gracing us with their presence tonight. Thank you to Representative Santos. Thank you to Ms. Beth Broadway, and then thank you to Ms. Saldana's campaign. And then also thank you to Albert Talley for hosting us this evening. And just want to say thank you also to King County Elections and the Seattle Foundation for their generous voter education fund grant that has allowed us to put on events such as these. So let's jump right into it. I mean, if you guys didn't know, we have elections coming up. So I just want to give a little bit of information on some good to know dates and just other information. If you know anyone who needs to get registered, they should get registered preferably by October 8th. That's coming up just next week. So you can register online on October 8th. You can also register by mail and update your registration status by October 8th. Beyond that, you have to do it in person at either King County Elections office in Renton or do that downtown at their annex office. So if you need to check your status, check your address, make sure that that's all updated, or if you know anyone who just needs to get registered, we have an easy link for you. It's bit.ly/WestHillVotes. So just be sure to go and check that out, and you can check out all of your information, and you can even see stuff like what's on the ballot, and it will give you exact information regarding the ballot that's going to be coming into the mail to you. Other important dates. So October 16th, if you are registered and you have your correct address in your registration, they will be mailing out the voter pamphlets to you. So you won't get them on the 16th, they're going out on the 16th. October 17th, the next day, the ballots are being mailed, and the Renton and Seattle accessible voting centers open. As far as I know, those centers are the same as King County Elections Renton office, as well as the annex office downtown on 4th Avenue. October 29th, that is highlighted because that is the final day that you can register to vote in person. Again, you have to be at one of the King County election offices to do that in person, and that's for new voters. That isn't for changes of address. And then finally, November 6th is election day. So you have to have your ballots postmarked by November 6th in order to have them counted. And you can mail those in. Postage is free this year, yay. Or you can also take it to one of the convenient drop boxes. We have one located right up here on the hill at the Skyway Library. So before I get into just talking a little bit about the measures, I also want to talk about some of the things that we've been doing as part of the Voter Education Fund. So many of you may have seen us out at the Skyway Outdoor Cinema or one of our quarterly meetings or any number of the events that we've tabled at throughout the summer. Well, we also decided to partner with Renton High School students as well as Albert Talley students. So they were able to get their peers registered. They did tabling during their lunch hours. They did all of the poster boarding throughout their schools, and you probably saw some of those pictures up as you were coming in and rotating through the slideshow. We actually have one of our students here, Lauren. You want to stand up and? I want to put you on the spot.
I'm very happy to have had this opportunity. It's really important to get out and vote, so I'm really glad that I was able to get some of my peers to do the same.
Thank you, Lauren. Yeah. Lauren and her peers at Renton High School were like super excited to work with us, and I mean it's just great that King County Elections offers up all this material that we can get out to them, that we can just make sure that people are having a presence and that they have applications in different languages and things like that, because we live in a very diverse area. So it's making sure that we get a lot of that exposure to anyone and everyone who will listen, right? So without further ado, I hope everyone got one of these sheets when you came in. On the front, you have the candidates who are going to be on our ballot. And just to note that predominantly we're highlighting the 37th district candidates, but also we have the U.S. Congress candidates as well. There are going to be other candidates on the ballot, including prosecuting attorney, as well as about a dozen or so judge positions. Those just aren't listed on here because we want to make sure that we focus on the 37th district and congressional district number 9. So, continuing on with our program, just wanted to take you through the measures that are going to be on the ballot. We live in unincorporated King County, so our predominant measures are going to be state measures, right? So I wanted to take through exactly what the measure is going to state on your ballot, but then also just list some key points that are going to be in the explanatory statements as well, if you haven't had a chance to look at those. Those are pretty lengthy, but I tried to highlight here just some of the core points of these measures. So the first, 1631, concerns pollution. This measure would charge pollution fees on sources of greenhouse gases, gas pollutants, and use the revenue to reduce pollution, promote clean energy, and address climate impacts under oversight of a public board. So the important things to note with this measure is that it applies to fossil fuels sold or used within the state and electricity that's coming from fossil fuels generated within the state or imported into the state. There's going to be a fee of $15 per metric ton of carbon emissions, and that fee will increase $2 every year until 2035, when hopefully the greenhouse gas reduction goals are met. It's a fee, it's not a tax, so it's going into a specific account for pollution control. So this isn't something that they can redirect the funds on. It has to be used for clean energy projects, climate and environmental projects. And then also the board that's going to have oversight over this is going to be a 15 voting member board made up of director positions from different environmental departments, at-large positions, and investment panels. So these will be public as well. Continuing on to measure 1634. This is around taxation of certain items intended for human consumption, otherwise groceries. So this measure would prohibit new or increased local taxes, fees, or assessments on raw or processed foods or beverages, with exceptions, or ingredients thereof, unless effective by January 15, 2018, or generally applicable. So I had a question earlier about that January 15, 2018. So that means anything that has passed as of the last election cycle. So any laws that went into effect this year, those would still remain the same. So some things of note, alcohol, tobacco, and marijuana are not included in tax protection under this. So the taxes can continue to be adjusted for inflation and increased on those items. And again, based on like the January 15, 2018, the sweetened beverage tax, for instance, in Seattle, that would continue to be collected. Measure number 1639, it concerns firearms. This measure would require increased background checks, training, age limitations, and waiting periods for sales or delivery of semi-automatic assault rifles, criminalize non-compliant storage upon unauthorized use, allow fees, and enact other provisions. So if you read through the explanatory statement in your pamphlet, it'll define what a semi-automatic rifle is. But things to note for this are that it's going to increase the age to buy a semi-automatic assault rifle from 18 to 21, and it will be illegal for any person to sell or transfer such assault rifle to a person under 21. There will be a $25 fee for purchases of semi-automatic assault rifles to offset the cost of this initiative. And then another important point is that failure to securely store your firearms. So that's part of the measure. So if you're not locking it up and someone is able to access it, there will be a new Class C felony for community endangerment if your weapon is used in public to either harm or kill someone. So if they are ineligible to have said firearm. Otherwise, if there is no injury or death involved in that situation, there would be a gross misdemeanor. There will be a new process to verify that people who have acquired pistols and semi-automatic assault rifles are still eligible to possess a firearm under state and federal law. And that would be referred to the police chief and the sheriff's office. And finally, we have measure number 940, and this concerns law enforcement. So this measure would require law enforcement to receive violence de-escalation, mental health, and first aid training, and provide first aid, and change standards for use of deadly force, adding a good faith standard and independent investigation. So this removes the requirement that prosecutors show that a law enforcement officer acted with malice to be convicted, and it creates two separate set of standards here. So one is a objective standard, and the other is going to be a subjective standard. The objective standard is, would a reasonable law enforcement officer have given the circumstances, believe that deadly force was necessary in that situation? And then also the subjective standard, which is, did the officer in question that committed the act intend to use deadly force for a lawful purpose and sincerely in good faith believe that it was necessary? So those are the measures that are going to be on the ballot. There is also an advisory vote stating that the legislature expanded without a vote of the people the oil spill response and administration taxes to crude oil or petroleum products received by pipeline, costing $13 million over 10 years for government spending. And that will essentially just ask, do you believe that this should be maintained or repealed? Okay. So that is it for the measures, and I just want to go ahead and again, thank you to our candidates who have graced us tonight. I want to welcome them up to the stage, and then we will get going with what I'm sure all of you are really interested in is talking with them. So we're going to start, first of all, with just some introductions. And so I'd like to welcome up to the stage Representative Sharon Tomiko Santos.
Thank you very much, Jeremy, and thank you all for coming out, taking your time from your evening when you could be doing many, many other things to inform yourself as voters and to participate in our civic privilege and duty. And I'm very grateful to West Hill for organizing this. I hope that this is the first of many to come. As Jeremy indicated, my name is Sharon Tomiko Santos, and I serve as one of the state representatives from the 37th Legislative District. It has been my privilege to serve this community and the communities of the 37th District for the past 20 years. I will say that I was raised in the 37th Legislative District. I attended elementary school, junior high school, and high school in the district. I was mentioning to someone that I am a proud Franklin Quaker, and my other little piece of, I guess, information is that one of my high school boyfriends was Renton Indian. So, and I actually grew up in this area. My first job was in Renton. My family moved from Beacon Hill to Rainier Beach, and so I share that because what's very important to me to share with all of you as my neighbors, as well as my constituents, is the communities of the 37th Legislative District, the people, the parents and family members of kids I went to school with, all of you were responsible for raising me, for shaping my worldview, for shaping my values, and for shaping my priorities. I do take pride that we are the most diverse legislative district in the state of Washington. That's very, very important to me. But as many of you know, and I was just talking to Jim and his wife a little bit earlier about how, you know, we were all very much impacted by the Great Recession. Today, if you were to look at some headlines, you would think that we have made a great recovery from the recession. But the truth is, some people have recovered from the Great Recession, and some people have done well since the Great Recession, but a greater proportion of our communities, our neighbors, have done worse and are really struggling to even come back up to the positions that we were prior to the Great Recession. That's very important because that plays a role in how we look at a whole variety of things, such as where are we going to make the investments of our hard-earned tax dollars. Many of you know that I serve as the chair of the House Education Committee. It is a position that I feel very strongly about as the daughter of a teacher and as the product of our public schools. I see too many of our kids not having the same opportunities as other kids, and we do have the power to change it. Thankfully, the legislature has found resolution with the courts around McCleary, which has been the biggest bugaboo, as many of you know. And while there are still some things that need to be tweaked, we didn't get it exactly right, we have at least have the blessings of the court to restore the jurisdiction back to the legislature. That's important. I want to make one note, since Jeremy said that the judges are not on your sheet. One of the most important races this November, I will just note, is for a position on the Washington State Supreme Court. And I will tell you that Justice Gonzalez, Stephen Gonzalez, who is an incumbent justice on our Washington State Supreme Court, is being challenged right now by somebody who is, and I don't normally try and throw other people under the bus, but this gentleman who is running against Justice Gonzalez is unqualified to serve in the position of justice. He has been sanctioned by the King County Bar for violations of not just judicial canons, but all of the rules for running for justice. And so I want to make that point because the state Supreme Court is our highest court in the state of Washington. The other two committees that I sit on, I will mention in passing because I think that they're important, but my passion is around education. I also serve on the Trade and Economic Development Committee. You heard about Initiative 1631. Trade and economic development does deal with energy, telecommunications, and economic development policy. I also serve on the Business and Financial Services Committee. When I was first entering into the workforce right out of high school, I started working, as I said, in downtown Renton as a banker. I continued to work into my young adulthood as a banker down in Renton. And so I understand the importance of having a vibrant financial services sector that serves all of our needs, including having banks and credit unions serving all of our community members. But the most important piece about serving on the Financial Services Committee is I'm very proud to have been the prime sponsor and the creator of our Financial Education Public-Private Partnership, because I think that many of the mistakes, both from the standpoint of our financial institutions, but also on the part of our consumers, could have been avoided had we been more informed consumers of financial services and products. And so the Financial Education Public-Private Partnership is out there trying to train our educators so that we can pass along this type of financial education to our young people. What do I see in the future? As I'm going to focus again on education policy because that is my passion. One of the things that we have, and I was talking to a retired educator, thank you very much for your service, and we know we have family members who have served in the education field. We are not replacing our workforce. And many of our students have received the message that becoming an educator, becoming a teacher, is not something that they should aspire to, because there's not a lot of respect in the field. There's not a lot of remuneration for your efforts. So as a consequence, as a member of the baby boomer generation, we are seeing flight coming out of the schools. And the question really becomes, who will be teaching the next generation? Your grandkids. And if you haven't had kids yet, your kids. So we have been working to make sure that we are reversing that trend and starting to engage young people to think about education as the honorable profession that it is. As I said earlier, my mother was an educator. She worked with the severely developmentally disabled students in the Seattle public schools. One of the things that I learned from her, and more important, what I learned from her students, is every one of our young people has an ambition, has an inspiration, and it doesn't matter how differently they may be abled. Everyone has aspiration and ambition. I also learned that every student has aptitude and ability, but they may be different. They may be different. And if you have more than one child, you know your children can be different. And then finally, I learned that every family, every student comes to school with assets and advantages, but they may all be different. And what I am hoping to institute in the state of Washington is a more responsive public education system that meets our students where they are, recognizing their personal interests and aspirations, recognizing their abilities and aptitudes, and recognizing their assets. The last thing I'm going to say, because I'm getting the 30-second sign, is that we need all of you to engage in this effort. It used to be that our schoolhouses were the centers of our community. We need to remember that those schoolhouses still can be the centers of our community. They can be the places where our seniors meet. They can be the places where families find access to resources, where we have library nights, where we have other resource nights, just as we are doing here at Talley High School. I hope, as I said at the beginning, that this voter town hall is the first of many voter town halls to come. Because if we cannot engage the members of our community in understanding what matters to them and engaging with their elected officials in this dialogue, then we really won't have much of a democracy left to fight for in the end. So again, thank you so much for taking your time to be an informed voter. I'm going to look forward to the questions that you will be posing to me, I hope, later.
Thank you, Representative Santos. Next up, we're going to have Ms. Beth Broadway introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Beth Broadway, and I am running for the Senate position for the 37th District. And I'm not a professional politician in any way. I am actually a teacher. I teach the Hebrew language in several actually different areas of Bellevue and Seattle, as well as online. So I teach students, I like to say, from 3 to 83 years old, and education is really important to me as a teacher, and it is also something that I know that we have to just keep working to improve all the time. It is not a place where we can just afford to sit back and say, oh, I feel that we're doing good enough at that, because the more that we go on into the future, the more things there are that everyone has to know in order to just get through life. So that's very important to me. I wanted to just share with you all for a moment, first of all, why am I a teacher who works 4 jobs to stay alive? Why am I running for a political office right now? No, I am not just a glutton for punishment. And no, I don't feel that I need less sleep at night. But I'm partly doing this because my own students inspire me, and they say, well, I don't know if I could do something like that. I don't know if I could run for a government position. I don't know if I'm smart enough or I'm well-funded enough. And I'm here to say tonight, you don't have to be a genius. You don't have to be a millionaire, not even close. All you have to be is old enough and have a desire to serve. Well, it also helps, of course, to be a citizen. I believe most of us here are already in that boat if we're working on voting. And it is also, I think, important for us as voters to not just leave our local and state governments out there to the politicians. We have seen, especially in Washington, D.C., how politicians can get stuck in a rut and just end up being in the business of keeping themselves with a job. And that is not what we need. I think the original founders of this country envisioned a more citizen legislature, and that is what I am hoping to be able to do. So just a couple of things about voting. And I have always loved the quote by George Bernard Shaw that goes something like, democracy is a system designed to ensure that the voters get no better system of government than we deserve. Which basically means if you don't vote, you can't complain. And if you do vote, you should think hard about who you vote for. I'm one of those people who loves to get my voter booklet in the mail because I like to read it all, even the boring parts. But it is so, so important to get young millennials and even older people who somehow just kind of fell through the cracks and never got to vote before, to get all of your friends and your neighbors to say, yes, I will be voting this year. There is so little voter participation, especially in the midterm elections, which we're in right now. So please, I would like to ask everyone here, even if you don't vote for me, that you would all check with all your neighbors to make sure that they are voting, because that is crucial to this democracy that we have to be able to function. So, all right, just a couple more things about my hopes for what I would like to do as a legislator, as a senator. I am here as a person who thinks that our country and our state has a tendency to want to pass more and more and more laws and regulations without actually thinking about, are we really doing a good job of enforcing the ones we already have? And those laws that we do have, are they all still there for a good reason? I think it behooves us to look at the laws that we have in the state, of which there are a lot, and say, what is this for? Is this good for our state? And how are we funding the enforcement or the implementation of this law? I spent a lot of time recently with our state budget just trying to get a grasp of where all of those millions and millions of dollars are going, and let me tell you, it is quite overwhelming. And I think that if we don't take a hard look, and let's face it, not all of us have time to read several hundred pages of the budget, even if we really wanted to spend our time that way. I think it's very important for us to tell our representatives, tell our senators what it is that should be the spending priorities, and for us to make it clear that we expect our government to spend only what they really need to spend. Because where is all that money coming from? It is coming from your wallet, and your wallet, and my wallet, and your wallet. Nothing is free. So we were speaking, Representative Santos was speaking about financial education. Well, I can tell you that my primary financial education came from my own parents, and my father's favorite quote about finances was, "Nothing in life is free. Someone always has to pay for it." And so it is important for us to think about where those benefits that we are getting, where those things come from, and to make sure that the government is spending wisely. I believe that we have too many taxes going on in our state, and that we could honestly go without some of those taxes by actually just spending more efficiently. In particular, the taxes that I am speaking about involve some of these initiatives. In fact, I am very much opposed to the gas tax. As it happens, it's not just about the gas that you put in your car, it also is going to influence the price of the groceries that you buy, because those groceries came here most likely on a truck or on a ship that was using gas in order for it to come. So every time you charge more for gas, you are also impacting a lot of other things in your daily cost of living. Also, there needs to be some property tax relief going on, not just for this area, but for quite a few areas of our state, because it is becoming unaffordable for people to continue to own their own houses, and for those of us who are renting, I'm a renter, to be able to continue dealing with the continued rental increases. I mean, my rent goes up when property taxes go up because my landlord has to pay more taxes, and I'm sure that's the same for most of you as well. So it's important for us to look at, are we really needing all of these extra taxes? Also, I know one issue in particular in the Renton area is the issue of I-405. I'm very much opposed to our continuing to have the I-405 toll lanes. I think that we have basically proved over the last couple of years of it that we can certainly make a lot of money from it as a state, but we're not adequately reducing the amount of traffic congestion, which was originally part of the point in the law. Also, car tabs. It is really important to me that the car tabs that we have be based on a realistic valuation of our cars and not just an older valuation system that is charging us a lot of money for nothing. Again, affordability, right? We all want to be able to live and breathe and maybe even go out to eat once in a while instead of just worrying about directing all of our money towards our rent. So that was a big deal for me. And overall, I would just like to say, if you want to sum up my campaign in a phrase, it would be that I am seeking for greater enforcement of fewer laws. We have a lot of laws that need to be enforced, laws against drugs and vandalism and camping just anywhere you please. But we're at the point where law enforcement isn't able to enforce all of those laws, either because they're hearing perhaps from the city of Seattle that they should not, or because they feel like, oh, nothing will get prosecuted, we don't have enough funding to deal with it adequately, or enough people who know what they're doing to deal with it. So that's really important. And one other funding priority for me, I would say, one thing that I think we really should be directing more money towards in our state is mental health treatment and addiction treatment. Because only if we seek to address the core issues behind homelessness will we ever be able to actually reduce the amount of homelessness that we have in our area. So thank you for considering me for your candidacy, for your vote. And I have a table in the back with pamphlets and everything, and I hope to be able to talk to some of you later.
Thank you, Ms. Broadway. I also find those voter pamphlets pretty colorful. They're a good read, so I definitely suggest checking them out. And then finally, I'd like to invite to the stage Ms. Senator Savannah.
Good evening, and thank you so much for being here on Thursday evening. I think we're at right now. I just came back from Vancouver, and part of that is my current role as your state senator, both first as an appointed and then last year when I was able to secure through a special election the honor to be able to represent this district. I serve on 3 committees right now that to me have a lot of relevance to the priorities and the values that I see in our 37. So one is Transportation Committee, to at least what I was hearing a little bit earlier. And transportation is a huge key to economic opportunity for people, and how we build our infrastructure can impact whether people have access to opportunity or barriers. And as we know, the I-5, when it originally was built in a way that actually divided our part of our district and impacted in a negative way the international district, and the way that Rainier Beach is built as a pass-through, which is the community that I live in. The fact that we're able to build community, the fact that community comes together despite some of the infrastructure that was built in to make it harder for us to have safety, to have connection, and to be easily accessed, whether it's community colleges or jobs from our neighborhood. But a lot of us are here because this is a more affordable place, because we care about diversity, because we care about inclusion, and we want to have our kids grow up in that experience. So today I was down in Vancouver meeting with my colleagues as the Vice Chair of Transportation, because one of the key things of making sure that we get our priorities in the 37th is understanding what are the needs of residents all across our state. So I got a chance to go on a bridge that's 100 years old and is in desperate need of repair between Portland and Vancouver. And so many of our Vancouver folks, go to work in Portland, and their economies are very much connected. So, but traffic was good, so I made it back in time. And the other 2 committees I serve on, one is Labor and Commerce, and again, the importance of making sure that when we have laws that they are implemented and they make a difference for communities is a priority. And that's part of why I serve on our Labor and Commerce. That's the committee that oversees all of alcohol, tobacco, and our marijuana industry. It's also the one that oversees labor standards and economic development and opportunities for business. And so one of the pieces of legislation, if I'm able to go back on behalf of the 37th, is to make sure that when we have labor standards and wages, that we have the right enforcements of that. And so making sure that when there are employers that are stealing wages from their employees, that there's higher penalties, and that our L&I has enforcement ability to be able to make sure, because we have most of our employers are doing the right thing, but they're having to compete against a few employers that are trying to skirt taxes and are trying to make a buck on the backs of their own employees. And so that's one piece of legislation in talking with workers that has become one that I would like to champion. And the third committee I serve on is our state government, elections, and tribal affairs. And so one of our big priorities this last session was to open up democracy and access democracy and make it easier for residents to be able to exercise the right to participate and to feel that our government's more transparent. So we had a whole package that included, starting next year, and this won't be we won't have this weekend in the same way, because there won't be this, if you don't register now, you don't get a vote. Because we have now on the books same-day registration. And so if someone just moved, the last thing you're thinking about when you're facing foreclosure or your rents went up high and all of a sudden you find yourself like having to search for an apartment is, oh, I need to update my registration before it's too late. That is not going to be an issue starting next year. We also passed the Voting Rights Act to make sure that as our kindergartners look more like the United Nations, we have in our school districts anywhere from 40 to 70 languages being spoken, that our representation reflects that, and making sure that our local jurisdictions, our school boards, and this is really relevant to me, having worked with farm workers and immigrant janitors that clean our buildings downtown, that I was in Yakima this last weekend, where there's majority minority, 98% of that majority minority speak Spanish and are Latino, and yet their whole county commission does not reflect them. Their legislators and senators don't reflect their priorities, and so there's an opportunity with the Voting Rights Act to make that different, right? So they actually had a lawsuit in Yakima. They have representation, but when you look at some of the smaller cities, or when you look at their counties or school boards, you still don't see that reflected in who they get to elect. And so the Voting Rights Act allows jurisdictions to proactively look at that situation and make adjustments to districts. We have the city of Wenatchee is the first city to proactively try to improve the way that their local city councils are elected. And that's a positive step forward. And we also then introduced and passed into law legislation to help clarify who is funding people's elections, and hopefully making it easier then for people to identify and make sure that when we're looking at initiatives or when we're looking at electeds and seeing who's really funding that, who's really behind them, and then having that help inform your decision. And there's a bunch of initiatives on the ballot that are a priority to me that I do think improve our communities. But there's one that's really deceitful, and that's the one around affordable groceries, which is completely funded by soda companies and beverage companies, which they do good union jobs. I support their union jobs, but the fact that they're trying to say that soda is an essential grocery is something that I think a lot of our community has seen, that we have higher issues around diabetes and health issues that are impacted when they can spend millions of dollars trying to disinform our electorate. So why am I running? I'm running because I believe that democracy is about making sure that we create communities that are about dignity, justice, and inclusion for all. I am running because I have kids in our Seattle public schools. My parents were able to access the American dream because of their unions, because of opportunities given to them, that I want to make sure are a real opportunity for the next generations. And I'll just say, in terms of the importance of democracy, I mean, I agree with my opponent that democracy is not something that is something we can be passive about. We have to be engaging in it, and that democracy is not easy. It is not a foregone conclusion. It requires every generation to recommit that our voice matters, that we want to make sure that it's transparent, that it's inclusive, and that the only way to do that is by opening the doors more widely. My dad was an immigrant. They crossed the river multiple times. They worked in the cotton. They grew up in segregated Texas. He came up to the Willamette Valley where he felt like he had an opportunity. And it wasn't until he was a union member in a glass factory in Georgetown and I came around that he decided that his vote mattered, that he felt compelled to become a full citizen and be able to exercise his right and door knock with his labor unions and get out the vote. And ever since then, that has been instilled in me, the importance of civic activism and making sure that we stand up for the underdogs and make sure that we help people realize that their voice matters and that their vote counts. And that is why I'm running. So thank you so much for the opportunity to serve thus far as your state senator, and I look forward to the privilege to be able to do that again if you guys send me back in November.
Thank you, Senator. Now I want to invite all of our candidates back on stage. We're going to transition into our question and answer session. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, so we're going to open up questions from the audience. Just want to say, please address questions to all candidates. Please no personal digs at any particular candidate or their policies, and keep the questions on measures or policy, the community, and I'm going to open that up, first of all, with just hopefully a fun question, especially given the setting that we're in right now at Albert Talley High School. What were you like in high school? And how does that inform where you are and who you are today? And we'll start with Representative Sanders.
Well, thank you. You know, it's always hard to be self-reflective. My husband always told me that. But I guess I will say that as a high school student at Franklin High School, I was an engaged member of the student body. I didn't participate in sports. I was not very athletic. I gave myself a black eye, in fact, when I was in high school. I thought I wanted to be an actress because I was inspired by some historical drama. And so I tried to participate in theater classes and quickly realized that I did not have the talent and I didn't have the willingness to starve. So, but I did learn how to project my voice. So that came in handy afterwards. But where I think I really found my voice and my footing was in organizing my fellow students for causes that I believed in. So I reactivated at Renton High School the, at that point, defunct Asian Student Coalition. I also worked with my fellow students, not only at Franklin, but across the Seattle Public School District to fight against a federal court order around desegregation in favor of a community-developed response to our desegregation order. And finally, I engaged with my fellow students on organizing the nation's very first day of remembrance, where we gathered together at Old Six Stadium to finally tell our grandparents that there was no shame in anything they did when they were incarcerated because they were Japanese Americans during the Second World War, which opened the floodgate to efforts like redress. And so I would say I was an organizer and an activist and frankly a little bit of a geek.
Well, I'll have to agree with you on the geek statement. I was definitely one of those in high school. I was also a workaholic, which is apparently still a characteristic of mine. I was very busy taking a lot of upper level classes because someone had convinced me somehow that if you just took enough AP classes that you would make plenty of money for the rest of your life and it would all be fine. I'm here to tell you that is not totally true. However, I did take a lot of those classes. I also was involved in softball and the drama club and a whole lot of other high school organizations and service organizations. Like I said, workaholic, that hasn't changed. But mostly, in terms of organization or political involvement, my parents were deeply involved in politics on the East Coast where I grew up in North Carolina, and so I saw from the beginning just how much work it took to be involved in politics. I got tons of splinters, from those little lumber stakes that they used to put signs up with, all that. So I was involved for a while. I went to Girls State, where we actually were debating at the time. North Carolina did not have a state lottery, but we spent a lot of time debating in Girls State. Would a state lottery be a good idea? And if so, what would the funds need to be used for in order for us to prove that it was a good idea or not? So, and with that, being interested in policy and being interested in law is something I've always been interested in, although I was very sure that I didn't want to be a lawyer. I thought that it would be much better to be a teacher and to help inspire people from a very early age to want to serve and to be good people in our world.
So in high school, I just actually ran into one of my high school colleagues, classmates, down in Vancouver, and she and I ran cross country together. But I did not run cross country because I actually liked running. I hate running. It was just, I really liked the people. They were really nice people that were in cross country, and so I ran with them. I had shin splints the first year I did that, and then I had horrible knee problems from that. But it was a great experience of trying to persevere through and really try to push myself. So in high school, I would say I went to parochial school. So I went to Guadalupe in West Seattle, and then I went to Kennedy High School. And I will say similar, one of the things, I really hate cliques. I hate cliques, and I hated cliques in high school. And so, but the people I hung out with I wasn't actually musical. I like musicians, but I would hang out with a band. I did drill team one year, and I did softball as well. Shortstop position is my favorite, and I mean I was always very service oriented. I mean I was involved with the Diocesan Council of Catholic Youth. That's pretty geeky, and also did a lot of service in Tacoma. Was involved in their multicultural day, and tried to be someone that always was kind of pushing on this whole the male-dominated experience of being in Catholic school, and really kind of try to be an outspoken young woman.
Thank you. I'd like to open it up to the audience. Any questions?
All right, to each of you, what is the most important attribute a good legislative candidate can have, and why?
Well, based on my research so far, it seems to be a lot of patience for reading hundreds of pages of documents. So a love of reading, perhaps. But in truth, I think the most important characteristic is to be able to care honestly and truly, so empathy, to care honestly and truly for the people that you are representing, and not only just vote what might be on your mind at that moment, but to really think about who am I representing and what would they want me to do right now.
Empathy. I mean, but I think, and then I'll just say to the empathy is being able to actively listen to the underlying issue and feeling that that person is expressing to you or the community group, and help kind of and try to find those connecting dots to how you actually try to make some impact on that underlying thing. Maybe not what they're asking for, but what it really is motivating them.
I think you're going to find agreement. I'm going to choose this particular word, however, because I think it's very important, and I think it's probably one of the things that is most missing, and that is integrity. Personal integrity and professional integrity, which encompasses the attributes that you heard from Ms. Broadway and Senator Saldana. But I would say values-based integrity is the most important characteristic that an elected official can bring.
When speaking about education and the importance of our teachers and their dedication and needing to have the respect, what about the effort to try to make their salaries more? They pay the same thing to go to school. They do continuing education. Our youngest daughter is a teacher. And the work they put into it, their salaries really, really need to become more commensurate and involved with the regular community. And they get their raises taken away. They get them given and then taken away. We, as a private sector, we can't do that. It wouldn't be tolerable. So I want to know what your feelings are and your plans to try to work on.
Well, I mean, I think that is exactly what McCleary was about, was the undervaluing of our educators. And as much as there's still more work to be done around salaries, that was one thing that McCleary is about. And I talked to our PTAs about this. Like, this is not new resources. This is about just attempting to pay our educators what they should have been getting a decade ago. And thankfully, almost all of those contracts that were negotiated this year add for the first time significant, meaningful raises for our educators. And I think part of it then is the other piece that they're feeling is their workloads. And so that's the piece that we need to address, I think, next. Is retain and maintain our commitments, and that requires, going back to making sure everyone pays their fair share of income, because right now what we're feeling is it's not so much just the property tax. What we're feeling is that the majority of people in Washington State are paying up to 17% of their income on taxes, and we have the wealthiest among us without opportunities to pay, and they're paying about 3%. So we need to sustain a progressive revenue so that we can sustain those salaries, so we don't end up 2 years from now back in the same boat. So that's what I'd say, is that we need to address real revenue, and we also need to go back to workloads, so looking at nursing, counseling, all the things that we know help educators be successful and our families and children really get the education they deserve.
I, as a teacher, of course, love the idea of a raise. I think that it is actually really wrong to give someone a raise by which they're then planning their own personal budget. What can I afford for my rent right now and what can I not? And then to take it away. So that needs to be something that once a salary is established for a teacher, that cannot be reversed. At the same time, I also think that handing a school a big check and saying, here, why don't you do something with this check? You could maybe pay teachers more, is not quite the answer. I think that there need to be some sort of standards attached to the way that money is being used and what is expected. We all know many wonderful teachers in our lives, and I'm only here today because some of my wonderful teachers that I had. But we also, let's face it, we all know those cranky people who are our teachers who really were only just sort of putting it in there so they could get their pension. And I think that we need to really look at the merits of the person who is getting those salaries as well, instead of saying everybody gets a 20% raise if they've been here for 5 years. I think that there needs to be a little more, let's just say, honest look at those salaries.
So, I'd like to start with a little personal anecdote. I said my mother was a teacher in the Seattle Public Schools. I said to some of you, I don't know if I said it here, my father was a pastor. He was an associate pastor. So he actually didn't draw a salary. He drew a stipend. But we also got to live in a parsonage or subsidized housing, which meant that my mother was the real income earner in my family. I remember, and as I said, she was a special ed teacher. She worked with those who were the most physically and cognitively challenged students. And her students, her kids, as she referred to them, ranged in age from 8 to 16, but they were all at about the second grade level. And she would have to help physically manipulate some of these larger children into their seats so that they could learn. It's physically a difficult job. I remember when she retired, or when she wanted to retire, spending hours at the living room table trying to figure out if she could afford to retire, because by this time my father had already retired, and for the first time in their 50s they had a mortgage. We have done a good job this year with increasing salaries for teachers, but that doesn't mean that we have actually done the fullest job of supporting education, because there's a big pension hole right now. My father, who lost his wife, and the children who lost their mother 20 years ago, couldn't be able to support my father into his 90s today if my mother didn't have a good paying job with benefits. And so that's the job we still need to do, and I absolutely concur with the senator. We can't afford to do that unless we expand the pie. And we need to be able to do that and not just rely on two small sources of income for the state.
Okay, we're going to talk on financing. What is your feeling on an state income tax?
Thank you. Thanks, Jim, for that softball. As you know, but maybe others don't know, I was very proud to be one of the founding legislative members of the Tax Reform Coalition back in the early 2000s, which tried to pull together labor unions, faith-based communities, citizens and community groups to argue for the need for something that was progressive, that understood that we as a state have needs, we have responsibilities to our citizenry, and that it didn't make sense that we have a system that actually taxes those who are least able to afford it the most proportionately. So I support a progressive income tax. I also support transforming our very regressive B&O tax system so that small business owners, which frankly comprise the bulk of our 37th legislative district, is one that is more fair to small business owners as well.
I am opposed to the idea of a state income tax. I think that we would do better to redo the B&O tax, actually, in terms of income. Now, if it turns out that the majority of our state voters would like to have an income tax, I think that is something that needs to happen by referendum. Currently, it is not within the way our Constitution is set up to be able to just have an income tax. It really has to be sort of looked at from the foundations if we're going to do that. I would say, though, that one of the reasons why our state is doing so well with high-tech companies and business in general is that people want to bring businesses to a state that does not have a state income tax. So if we are going to have a state income tax, we need to think about what could be the potential cost in terms of businesses leaving our state or not wanting to continue to develop here. So I'm opposed, actually.
I'll have to disagree. I don't think that's why business is here, because businesses aren't included in income tax in that same way. But I do think that I am for progressive. This is one of my priorities. So I have 3 priorities this year. One is addressing housing and homelessness, and we in the 37th have a particular opportunity. There's lots of projects and opportunities to build affordability in our district, and so that is a priority. The second is reform around how our state is funded. So I do think, to adding on to what both said, is that we do need to have a really look at reform. But I think regardless, as we're doing that, we need to move forward the capital gains. We have the votes, and if voters come out strongly, we will even be able to move that forward. Capital gains is part of building a progressive revenue base. And the third thing is really removing barriers. So making sure that we're actually removing the barriers that are preventing community to be able to access wealth. That means removing I-200, which has taken wealth out of the 37th. It has made it harder for small businesses and minority businesses to be able to get their fair share of government contracts and be able to build the pipeline in our education system to be able to have people have quality jobs and be able to be competitive in the workplace.
I'm actually an educator at Bellevue College, and I'm also a renter. And I can tell you that out of the vast majority of us, I don't think any of us are just kind of collecting a pension. However, that being said, one of our biggest frustrations is housing. So for the there have been about several different times a number of my colleagues who mostly have their masters, PhDs, have also come to me and said, hey, I'm concerned about being able to make rent at the beginning of the fall quarter. So pursuant to that, I'm curious, what are your feelings on lifting the ban on rent control? Because also in my studies and advocacy on housing, that rather certain elements of rent control have been found to be effective. And I'd say certain elements, not necessarily an entire monolithic suite, but just in order to be able to explore that in different cities and to give different municipalities a freedom, I'm curious about your just your feelings on just lifting the ban in general.
I think that we can only lift the ban on rent control if we put a ban on property tax increases, because those things go hand in hand. I think the best way actually so what I'm saying is if you're increasing property taxes,
Yeah.
then we couldn't expect the people who are renting out the buildings to be able to keep that at a consistent price forever. If, let's say, I'm gonna give a nice round number, okay? Let's say if you pay $1,000 for rent now and you have a rent control that says you're always gonna be paying $1,000 for the next 15 years, well, what if the property tax just keeps going up and up and up and your landlord can no longer afford to own that place? I guess that's what I'm referring to. But in general, I think the best way to make more affordable housing would be to actually work with the Housing Trust Fund to make building affordable housing easier for people. And honestly, as a person who lives in the 37th district, you know what? If we need to do some rezoning work in order to allow multifamily dwellings along Lanier Avenue or wherever, we should do that. And also with that needs to come more of law enforcement so that places can be safe for families to live, even if they're, you know, right now they're not particularly child friendly.
So this last year, I was the prime sponsor for giving local jurisdictions options to be able to do rent control. So there's a whole suite of package of housing bills that we're working on right now because that's, I think, the top priority next year. But rent control should be part of that toolkit that local jurisdictions would have.
And you're going to hear something different from me. I oppose rent control. I don't come to that position lightly. I come to that position both having worked in the field of building affordable housing, having been married to a man who made his life work building affordable housing, including serving as the Secretary's representative of Housing and Urban Development. When I look at other jurisdictions across the country, namely San Francisco and New York as two primary examples, rent control has not solved the problem of housing affordability. And in fact, has created a system that is gamed by many residents of both cities, where people continue to be priced out of housing unless they happen to be in the right queue of people who know how to access that rent-controlled building. The only way to really address housing affordability is really a market-driven solution, which is the more units you have, the more affordable your rents will be. And so I am a strong, strong advocate of ensuring that we can put more money into the Housing Trust Fund, preserve the opportunities for our nonprofit housing developers who suffer from the same issues that we all do when they go out to buy land at escalating prices of land, and giving them the opportunity to engage in long-term leases with public lands. And that's why I was the primary sponsor of creating the Public Land Bank, so that we who are the taxpayers of lands that have been purchased don't go selling back into the private market those lands at prices that have been, what do I want to say, spiraled upwards, but instead ensure that our nonprofit partners have access to those dollars, and the only funds that they have to raise is the actual development dollars.
Hi there, my name is Rachel Egan. I'm here on behalf of the Southeast Seattle Emerald, and I have a question about voter turnout. So voter turnout on the national stage is pretty abysmal, as is the state and local level. Why do you think people aren't voting, and what are you doing to change that so that more voices are being heard?
Well, so part of it was helping support the Access to Democracy package last year that I spoke to earlier. And I think the other piece in terms of, is asking people why they're not voting and getting out there. So we have hired 2 part-time community organizers that are Amanda and Legea that was here earlier. We went through our precinct and recognized between the 37th and the 43rd next door, we have 5,000 less votes. And on candidates, that's one thing, it can make a difference. But on initiatives and other, it makes a real big impact. And so we looked at the precincts, including many of the precincts in the Skyway West Hill area, in Rainier Beach and in Beacon, Rainier Valley, and the Ivy, and prioritize knocking on those doors, talking with them and surveying them about what's their top priorities. Are they thinking about voting? Why are they not? So really, Amanda could probably get into the weeds of what we're hearing. But I think it's a couple of things. One is they moved, or they're not housing stable, and it makes it hard for them to prioritize this. They speak multiple languages and don't feel like they know enough about the ballot to be able to really feel like they can do it confidently. And then we're hearing, I've heard from elders that they just didn't feel like their vote counted. Now they have their grandkids in their homes and they've committed that they're going to vote. So we'll see. But I mean, I think so. Those are a couple of things, and that's what we're doing, is really trying to get out and door knock and speak with residents.
So the first thing that I'm doing to help try to get more voter participation is actually just to run for this office. I think that it's very demoralizing when you open your ballot and realize, oh, well, why am I even voting? There's only one person running for this office. It's nothing personal against Senator Saldana at all. However, I feel that part of being a voter who cares is realizing that you get a chance to make a choice, and you get a chance to vote for the person who shows your values, or at least the closest person to sharing your values. With that particular issue, one of the things that I would really like to do if I get elected is move the primary dates back a little bit into the year, because personally, I was not a fan, just to put it mildly, of the presidential candidates that we ended up with in our national election. But as Washingtonians, I think a lot of us actually felt that way, that we weren't, those people, the 2 people who ended up on the national ballot weren't the ones who really most were what we wanted. As Washingtonians, we really didn't get a chance to have much of a say in that, because our election was so late in the year, our primary election, that we couldn't really change much at that point. So what I would like to do is decrease voter apathy and feeling like my vote doesn't count by moving those election dates maybe into April or May, like more of the rest of the country. And also just, everyone that I'm talking to, I'm encouraging to get out there and vote and to really care. That's really important.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I have to say that a lot of the apathy that I sense and have sensed over the years is largely because people take a look at what's going on in Washington, D.C. And unfortunately, there's a trickle-down effect with people's sort of disappointment, if not disgust, with what's going on in our nation's capital, which is most unfortunate. I think what I have committed to doing are a number of things. One is I try and show up. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I'm here. I also make sure that I'm out talking to young people and giving them a reason to be engaged in their communities. And then the last thing is, from a policy standpoint, one of the things that we passed this past legislative session was a civics bill. We have really de-emphasized civics as part of the educational system in sort of the prioritizing focus on college entry, and particularly university level college entry. And so, making sure that the kids are able to stack up the 3 credits of science and 3 credits of math and, the 2 language arts, the foreign language credit, all of that leaves very little time for civics. And I would argue courses like financial education, courses like life skills, courses like civics are really very, very important to the lifeblood of our society.
And we have time for one last question, and this is going to go to Mark.
Here in Skyway, there's an issue of local interest that I think all 3 of you have heard me speak about before, but and that is the way that pot stores have been cited as legal state license. Currently, there are 5 in Skyway. There were already 5 open for a couple of years, and when this year the state said, "Oh, we need to license another pot store in the jurisdiction that includes unincorporated King County," and a store said, "We'd like to open in Skyway," there was no barriers to any political force who's chartered to make those decisions to say, wait a minute, a 6th store in Skyway doesn't even make sense. And I'd just like to hear that the ground truth right now is that 15 retail marijuana stores have been licensed in unincorporated King County to date. 11 of those are in White Center and Skyway. None of them are east of I-405 or 167, that kind of corridor, and that's where 80% of unincorporated residents live. Can you make sense of it, and can you suggest any potential relief?
So Mark, thank you for raising that issue again. You first shared that with me during the Skyway Parade and the gathering that occurred afterwards. As it turned out, there was somebody from King County there. So I put him on the spot and I said, I'd like to know what is going on with the siting of all of these pot shops. There is a study that's going on. I've asked to receive a copy of the study when it is available. It is not yet available. In the meantime, I think that you do have a very legitimate, rational concern if we are going to be disproportionately impacted. I think that there is a potential of an opportunity to explore that through legislation and the Liquor Cannabis Board. I know that in the past we have, as a legislature, taken a look at disproportional siting as a condition. I will be honest and say I don't serve on a committee that deals with local governance issues, and that would be, in some ways, a crossover between local governance as well as the state's oversight of the cannabis. So I think that there's an opportunity to at least begin rattling some cages.
So as to the locations of these stores, I think that we need to be careful about how many places that have the potential to become crime scenes too close to each other. Not many places will say, oh, we're fine with allowing 10 bars to be on the same block, just because they know that it could disproportionately affect the amount of law enforcement it takes to deal with that area. However, the state cannot do too much to affect the concept of competition, which I think is part of the issue here. I think it has to be more of an issue that is addressed in terms of the enforcement of the laws that there already are on the books in terms of what can be in what areas, and trying to convince the local government to be a little more logical about the way they're doing it. I don't think there's a whole lot that the state legislature could do to say, well, we're gonna have to separate some of these stores into a different area, unfortunately.
So also, and this has been on my mind, and so since we saw each other at Skyway Parade and have, I think even the town halls a year ago, I do serve on the committee that oversees the cannabis industry and have asked both the representatives of that industry to talk, to come and meet with us and stakeholders for us to better understand the industry. And what I've talked with you about are a couple of things. One is that any kind of development that's coming from the outside, I think we as community folks can call for and demand benefits from that and accountability and for them to be responsible business owners and citizens in our communities. So I think there's a proactive approach that can be taken place. And I think the other thing we talked about, and I think in terms of whether the study includes this or something that we can request data on, is that if a local neighborhood is taking on more of this industry, how are we making sure that we're getting more of the benefit of those investments, of those taxes into our communities to help us see the kind of economic development that we want to see in our neighborhood. And if this is not it, how are we making sure that they're clear about the vision that we have for our neighborhood, and how are we asking them as business owners to help us meet that vision as residents of West Hill, for instance. So happy to talk offline, and so it's always good to bring it up again so that we make sure that we get the answers that we need. But I have made some inquiries since we last spoke. Thank you.
Well, that's all the time that we have. I want to thank Senator Saldana, Ms. Broadway, and Representative Santos for their time and their engagement with our community. Just real quick, make sure you get out and vote. Make sure you bring a friend. Make sure you get a friend to look at the pamphlet together even. A couple of things that we have coming up. We have October 16th will be the West Hill Community Quarterly. That will be at Campbell Hill Elementary. So look for more on that. And then also at the end of the month, we have a bowling alley takeover, Halloween bowling alley takeover. And look forward to that. Look for it on our My West Hill on Facebook. We also post it next door and everything else. And if you haven't, please sign up on our email list as well. Everyone have a great night and safe travels home. Oh, yeah.
Is that coming out Halloween?
It's on, Devin, I believe it's the 29th.
Yeah, October 29th. We're putting out free booths in Candy if you'd like to staff a booth and decorate it and make it pretty.
Yeah, I'm gonna bring my kids.
Yeah, for sure. It's gonna be a fun night.
Hi, Rebecca. Dennis Conrad. Nice to meet you. Thanks for doing such a great job. Yeah, okay.